Ladies and gentlemen, here's Johnny.
There's something eerie about watching an old episode of The Tonight Show. There's news that has long since slipped from popular memory.
Thank you, that's right. Obviously, you don't have money in the stock market.
And jokes that would never be told today.
Sorry. One investor I heard jumped off the World Trade Center. The Dow Jones beat him to the bottom.
History books cover important events, but they rarely tell you what life was actually like in a particular time and how things were viewed in the moment.
I took my money, all of it, out of the market last week and put it in the Kodak instant cameras.
A lot of things get edited out of historical summaries, and rightly so, you can't include everything. But in the overlooked media and moments of the past, there's a lot of interesting stuff that falls through the cracks. It got me thinking, what if you picked a day from the past, a single day, more or less at random, and looked through all the media you could find released on that date? TV, newspapers, advertisements, whatever. If you stitch that random patchwork of material together, would it reveal something interesting about the time from which it came? What if you looked at a single day in history? January 9th, 1986. The #1 movie is Out of Africa. The #1 song is Say You, Say Me by Lionel Richie. Dire Straits and David Foster top the list of just announced Grammy nominees. The Mammoth Hunters and Iacocca, an autobiography, top the New York Times bestseller lists. Reagan is president, Thatcher is prime minister. On the morning of January 9th, newspapers roll off the presses bearing two major stories. The largest one-day market drop in history just occurred yesterday, ironically caused by good job growth numbers, something about shifting interest rates. Meanwhile, Reagan has frozen all Libyan assets held in the U.S. in response to Muammar Gaddafi's assistance to terrorist groups. On the front page of the New York Times, those two headlines bracket a picture of Krista McAuliffe exiting a military vehicle where astronauts practice evacuations. She is scheduled to be the first teacher and American civilian to ever enter space. On pages A16 and A11 of the Times, there are large advertisements for fur coats. An article reports that the Voyager 2 spacecraft, having spent over 8 years on its journey thus far, has reached the third most distant planet of our solar system and discovered a new moon. An article on A12 critiques the president's recent press conference, counting 3 flubs. No prime minister answering parliamentary questions could survive many such sessions. While also noting that the president was effective anyway. Reagan communicates not on an intellectual, but on an emotional level. Headlines similar to those of the Times top other major papers around the world. The Los Angeles Times has a photo below the fold of former President Richard Nixon visiting a New York restaurant. It's been 11 and a half years since he resigned the presidency. On page 3 of The Guardian, an article bemoans the growing gap between rich and poor. In The Oregonian, 2 letters to the editor complain that an article on the dangers of punk music had only cited heavy metal bands. An expansive article in Style tells of the growing fashionability of wearing leather. A feature in Sports highlights Bruce Jenner and what he's doing after his athletic career, making TV apparently, most recently Star Games. The reporter remarks that Jenner seems down to earth in spite of his fame. Expecting a hot dog, you meet a guy with a sweet relish for life. An article in the business section announces that Kodak is discontinuing its instant photography business. On the same page, there is an advertisement for a car phone for as little as $39.99 a month. Technology articles appear throughout many papers. The New York Times chronicles the challenges of designing portable computers. The better models pack nearly all the functions of a desktop personal computer into an 8-pound plastic case. They are perfect for people who like to write while standing up in a telephone booth. In The Guardian, a long article goes into detail about newfangled mobile phones. Seeing someone using one in a car, or worse, in a restaurant, makes me cringe. The Oregonian has an article about a so-called demon dialer who is using an auto dialer on his $200 Atari home computer to flood the phone lines of televangelist Jerry Falwell, costing his organization an estimated $1 million in lost donations. The Los Angeles Times describes how computers are being connected into what are called bulletin board systems, public forums you can post on and read. There is something strange about the computers, says one bulletin board operator. things you would not tell your best friend, people tell me. There is comfort behind the screen. As the day unfolds, cameras are in several places to capture events. In the Oval Office, Ronald Reagan buys Girl Scout cookies from Elizabeth Brinton, known for selling record numbers of boxes. Elizabeth shows her sales skills.
You can buy some extra amount of cookies for your state dinner. I've left some order forms in the bag to pass around to your cabinet.
And Reagan shows his diplomatic tact by buying one box of every kind of cookie.
Well, for that I just have to hug you. Thank you.
Reagan also meets new members of the White House press corps, among them a man named Walter Robinson. Meanwhile, in Burbank, California, while taping The Tonight Show, Johnny Carson mentions the Columbia Space Shuttle, which will launch 3 days later. Across the country, at the Kennedy Space Center, another shuttle crew is training, including Krista McAuliffe, the woman featured on today's New York Times front page. They take a break to pose for a picture. The crew will launch 19 days later aboard a space shuttle named Challenger.
I'd like to try higher, please.
Higher than the 3. Here we go.
Telecheck says
The evening brings on primetime television.
Roganov from Muammar Gaddafi tonight told Western News reporters the affordable German road.
In America, there are new episodes of Cheers, Family Ties, Hill Street Blues, Night Court, Shadow Chasers, The Colbys, Magnum P.I., and The Cosby Show,
Come on, tell me what the movie was about.
which includes a scene about what happened to Cliff Huxtable while on a date with his wife.
Look, I couldn't help it if I fell asleep. Oh, come on.
Monday night, a city in fear.
The untold story is in the Inquirer.
Ranger offers it.
As the day of January 9th, 1986 comes to a close, The Tonight Show airs, featuring pianist Liberace, comedian George Miller, and actress Rosanna Arquette. Johnny Carson also reads the results of a tabloid poll on the top 10 heroes in America.
This is my Bible. I believe in these tabloids, every word.
Mostly because he's on it.
Bruce Springsteen, Johnny Carson,
Number 1 on the list, however, is no surprise.
Mother Teresa came second to Bill Cosby. Good night.
I started this project trying to find out what it would be like to be living on a particular day in 1986, but it turns out that it's a lot harder than I thought. Access to this sort of obscure history is spotty at best. On top of that, this video is almost completely about America, partially because I'm American, but also because obscure American media seems to be way easier to find. Presumably, many interesting things unrelated to the United States happened on that day, but it was hard for me to find any of it. It would be interesting to see what someone else with a different perspective and perhaps access to different resources would say about this same day. But there is another bias that we all have, and it's caused by the passage of time. We can't really look at these bits of news and media the way people looked at them at the time, because we can't help but view them in the context of everything that has happened since. If I'm honest, a lot of these things only caught my eye because later events gave them a new meaning or sense of irony. Muammar Gaddafi was killed in the Libyan civil war in 2011. Elizabeth Brinton's single-season sales record of 18,000 boxes of Girl Scout cookies stood for 29 years. Over her entire Girl Scout career, she sold over 100,000. The Mammoth Hunters and Iacocca are now off the bestsellers lists, but not out of circulation. In fact, as I was making this video, I happened to find both books in little free libraries that I often walk by. Denial of service attacks are now used on networks far more complex than a televangelist phone bank. Leather and car phones are both out of fashion, though for different reasons. Kodak has evolved and gone through a bankruptcy. Jenner is no longer best known as an athlete. Internet message boards are now ubiquitous, though that same feeling of comfort behind the screen seems to persist. Voyager 2 is well past all the planets and has left the solar system entirely. Journalist Walter Robinson is now best known for reporting the Catholic priest scandal in Boston and was portrayed by Michael Keaton in a Best Picture-winning film. Cosby is no longer America's role model, and Challenger disintegrated just after takeoff, killing everyone on board, including Krista McAuliffe. These days, we all seem very sure of ourselves, and there's no shortage of opinions about the significance of current events. But the truth is, none of us really know.
Say it for always.
Because our perspective on whatever is happening now will be changed by what comes after.
Say you, say me.
This is the late night place to be, right here on NBC.
Nobody watches anything else.
There's nothing else on, is there?
No.
The CBS late movie is gone. That's canceled. ABC runs like cartoons. That's it. That's it for us.